Namaskar and welcome to Samvad. On July the 2nd, His Holiness the Dalai Lama issued a statement affirming this continuation of the institution of the Dalai Lama. Now, both India and China have reacted to this statement in their own different ways. And it has set the ball rolling for further geopolitics, which has now become a part of the whole story of Tibet. To discuss this, we have with us Ambassador Dilip Sinha, who served as India's head at United Nations Affairs during its Security Council membership and was an ambassador to UN in Geneva. Ambassador Sinha is also former ambassador of India to Greece and has served on diplomatic assignments around the world. He has served in Bangladesh and Pakistan and was the head of Pakistan, Afghan, Iran desk in the Ministry of External Affairs. Now, what makes it even more interesting that Ambassador Sinha is also a very prolific writer, and he is the author of Legitimacy of Power, The Permanence of Five in the Security Council, and which makes it even more important, Imperial Games in Tibet, the struggle for statehood and sovereignty. Welcome to Samvad, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
So this statement from His Holiness, sir, he affirms the continuation of the Institution of Dalai Lama, which most of the people were thinking was going to happen, but the general people have been kept waiting for this announcement from His Holiness. Now, he has very categorically stated that the Gaden Phodrang Trust has the sole authority to recognize the future reincarnation. No one else has any such authority to interfere in the matter. Now, sir, since the issue of the institution of Dalai Lama has now become as much political as spiritual, what does this statement mean in both spiritual and political terms?
Well, the institution of the Dalai Lama started as a religious institution, and then under the fifth Dalai Lama, it also acquired political powers, and over a period of time, especially under the fifth Dalai Lama and thereafter, it became not only the spiritual head of Tibet, but also the political head, the administrative head of Tibet. Now, the current Dalai Lama has, of course, been living in exile since 1959, and he realized that it was important to separate the political powers from the institution of the Dalai Lama. And over a period of time, starting from 1990 onwards, he started slowly delegating his powers to elected representatives. And in 2011, he formally gave up all his political powers to the Tibetan government in exile, which is the Central Tibetan Administration, also based in Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh. So the political powers of the Dalai Lama have been since handed over to the political authority, which is an elected body. It has a parliament, it has a cabinet, and it has an elected president called a Sikyong. So the institution of the Dalai Lama itself is now entirely a religious institution, but of course, because of the personality of the 14th Dalai Lama, which is the current Dalai Lama, it continues to represent the whole nation of Tibet, the whole people of Tibet, the entire cause of Tibet. And in addition to Tibet itself and its people, he's also the spiritual leader of all Tibetan Buddhists, of people who follow the Lamaistic tradition and recognize him as their spiritual head. And these are people in Mongolia, in Taiwan, in China, in Japan, and several other countries, parts of Russia as well. So he is the spiritual head of all these people. Now, he realized that the institution of Dalai Lama, he said, could continue, did not continue because he'd already transferred all his political powers to the political authority. But when he said that, there was a lot of many people petitioned to him, requesting him to continue his work and to be reborn. Now, the tradition, the philosophy behind the institution of rebirth or reincarnation is that certain spiritual people need to continue their work beyond their lifetime, and therefore to do that, they are reborn to continue the mission. So when the people appealed to him to continue his mission, because his mission is not yet complete, that is the continuation of the Tibetan culture and the freedom of the people of Tibet, he said that he would, in response to the appeals, be reborn. He had given a slight indication in 2011, but then now he has confirmed it, and he has also confirmed the procedure, as again is the tradition among the institution of how the successor would be. He's not really selected, he's more like identified or recognized through a process which is both religious and one of deeply spiritual. So now he has clarified this, because in the modern era, obviously, everything has to be put in black and white. So he has specified that his successor will be identified, his rebirth will be identified by the Gaden Phodrang Trust, which is a registered body in India. And some of his closest advisors and religious people are members of this trust. So he has said that they will, and they alone will have the authority to recognize his successor. There was some talk about he possibly transferring his spiritual emanation to a young child through a process of emanation. That has happened in the case of certain other lamas, but not in the case of the Dalai Lama so far. So I think this statement of his puts an end to that kind of speculation, that he would emanate into a child in the course of his life itself. But that is now ruled out. So the process of succession will take place after he passes away, and then it's a body that is authorized to identify his successor will identify the successor. So this is the procedure and what he has said for his succession.
So that obviously is the spiritual part. Now coming to the political part, China has reacted along expected lines. The CCP spokesperson Mao Ning yesterday said that and I'll quote, that the reincarnation of the 15th Dalai Lama must be approved by the central government. Now, she further said the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama, the Panchen Lama, and other great figures of Tibetan Buddhism must be determined through the process of drawing lots from the golden urn and must be approved by the central government. Now, the Chinese government, she says, upholds a policy of religious freedom, but there are regulations governing religious affairs, including a management system for reincarnation of Tibetan living Buddhas. Now, sir, the institution of the Dalai Lama has been in existence since the 15th century. Now, whereas the communist government came into existence in 1949. So, obviously, the communist government has not established this process of selection. So, what is the process of selection of the Dalai Lama is Mao Ning, the spokesperson, referring to?
Well, the Communist Party of China wants to control everything in the country. It promises freedom. It promised to liberate. It came to have liberated Tibet, but we know what kind of liberation it has carried out in Tibet. It carried out the most massive destruction of Tibetan monasteries that has ever taken place in the history of that country. During the Cultural Revolution, they destroyed almost all the monasteries, so much so that the Panchen Lama, the previous Panchen Lama, who had stayed back in China and accepted communist rule, he had to protest. Remember, in 1959, the Dalai Lama fled from Tibet, but the Panchen Lama stayed back. And the Panchen Lama accepted communist rule, but he was so appalled by the destruction that he had to write a long letter to the Chinese communist leadership about the destruction of of Tibetan culture, and he was put in prison. And then he was released only after Chairman Mao's death. So that was the fate that was meted to a person who decided to remain loyal to China. Uh, Now, China in those days had polished the tradition of lamas and imprisoned most of them, destroyed religious institutions. But the Communist Party realized that it was not able to win the hearts and minds of the people of Tibet uh, by force. So after 1990, it slowly started relaxing its rules regarding the recognition of lamas. And in 2007, it passed an order specifying the procedure by which Lama, reincarnating Tulku, as it's called in Tibetan, would take place. And it has a whole procedure under which you apply for, it's as if it's a government post and you're applying for it. And then there's a procedure for approval, which is partly religious and essentially it's an approval by the Communist Party of China. So China has now taken a complete U-turn. And incidentally, after this procedure was introduced, the number of reincarnated, what China calls living Buddhas, China calls them living Buddhas, they are called Tulkus in Tibetan. The number of living Buddhas in Tibet has multiplied several fold because it has become a way of making money for the communist officials in Tibet. So this is what they did. Now, the Golden Urn is also another interesting institution that was introduced by a Qing emperor called Qianlong in 1793. And they also used to interfere in this process. And the Golden Urn was used for about, perhaps at the most 4, maybe 3, maybe actually 2 Dalai Lamas who were selected between the 9th and the 12th. Now, China says that this Golden Urn is the authoritative vessel to be used for the selection of the Dalai Lama, but then it came into existence only with the 9th Dalai Lama. So obviously, the earlier Dalai Lamas were selected by the Tibetans themselves. The other is that after the Golden Urn, as China claims, was introduced and was used for the selection of 3, or perhaps 4 Dalai Lamas. Now, all these 3, 4 Dalai Lamas died at a very young age. So obviously, this Golden Urn did not augur well. It was an ominous thing for the institution of Dalai Lama. And it was only with the 13th and 14th Dalai Lamas, in whose case even China accepts that the Golden Urn was not used, that the institution of Dalai Lama came back into its own. The 13th Dalai Lama declared independence when the Qing dynasty fell in China. And he went about re-establishing the Tibetan nation. And the current Dalai Lama, of course, he had to face at a very young age Chinese invasion. But he has symbolized Tibetan resistance to Chinese rule. And not just that, he's also been a figure of moral compass for the world. He's one of the few leaders who has adhered to non-violence as his political tool, despite facing one of the most brutal regimes in the world. So that shows the commitment to non-violence that he has, despite the difficulties that he has faced. So for China, the idea that they want to control the institution of Dalai Lama is very intriguing. Why does the Communist Party, which does not believe in religion, doesn't believe in God, why is it so keen that the Dalai Lama be reborn and the Communist Party should approve it? Obviously, it is because the Communist Party has not been able to establish the legitimacy of its rule over Tibet by force. And therefore, it wants to fall back upon Tibetan Buddhism to legitimize its rule in Tibet and pray that if it has the Dalai Lama's loyalty, then it will also earn the loyalty of the Tibetan people. But it has tried that with a fake Dalai Lama, and now when it will have a fake Panchen Lama, and now when it has a fake Dalai Lama, as it will, again, it will have no, the person will have no spiritual authority over the people, because it is essentially a deeply religious matter. It's a matter of faith. And religious leaders have to earn the trust of the people. which the Panchen Lama, who's currently in Tibet, has not been able to earn. And the same fate will await uh, the, the new Dalai Lama that China will obviously select and impose upon the people of Tibet. Incidentally, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said that he will be reborn only in the free world, because if the role of the reincarnation is to continue the mission, then he can do it only when he's reborn in the free world. If he's reborn in Tibet, then obviously he'll be whisked away by the uh, Chinese, as happened to the Panchen Lama. So the current Lama, the fake Panchen Lama, was appointed by the Chinese after the Panchen Lama, who had been identified by the monastery, was identified, and the Chinese got to know of it, and they immediately uh, imprisoned him along with his family. We don't know whether he's alive, but he and his entire family have been whisked away, never to be seen since 1995.
What you have said is a very intriguing. This is a very intriguing situation actually. The CCP is they are an atheist regime. They don't believe in souls, reincarnation, or the existence of heaven or hell. They believe that once a human is just a body, and once it dies, it just dies, and that is the end of the story. Now, to follow the reincarnation, get so interested in reincarnation and guiding the reincarnation is something which generally people don't understand the reasons, but you have explained those reasons. Now, Mao Ningxi further, it was an elaborate press conference because questions were directed at her. She said that CCP's push to sinicize is not a restriction on religion. Now, the survival and development of any religion must adapt to the country's social environment and cultural traditions. Quote close. Now, they seem to be making efforts to sinicize all religions, all ethnic minorities living in China. We have the examples of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, the Tibetans. Now, the great surveillance and autocratic state seems apprehensive and very apprehensive, to be more precise, of religious and ethnic minorities. Now, is that understanding correct? I mean, what I'm saying is that correct? And what are they so apprehensive of?
But you said it rightly that their authority is not accepted by the people, especially the minorities. But even the Chinese people themselves are chafing under the strict communist rule. And it's a mockery to say that religion will be controlled by the state and the people have freedom of religion, but they must believe what the state tells them to believe. And especially a state that does not believe in the kind of things religion believes in. Religions believe in a supreme being, or perhaps other different kinds of supreme beings. It believes in, as you mentioned, heaven, hell, rebirth, etc. There are all kinds of beliefs that philosophical, metaphysical beliefs that religions have. And a communist party that doesn't believe in these things is trying to force belief down the gullets of the people. And it is ridiculous. But then it shows that communism has not been is not being accepted as an ideology by the people. And the Communist Party realizes that in order to continue its rule, to legitimize its rule, it needs something different from the communist ideology. And it is turning back to religion. Religion has been cynically used by many governments. We know of some in our neighborhood, uh, to legitimize the rule of the government. And it is now ironic, in fact shameful, that the Communist Party should turn to religion to legitimize its rule over the people.
Sir, I mean, just a while ago, before we started this conversation, we had this statement from Kiran Rijiju, the cabinet minister, who said that the right to decide on the successor rests solely with the Dalai Lama himself. Now, that's a very affirmative and very positive statement coming from a minister who is in Dharamshala himself. Now, we have seen that once the Dalai Lama's 90th birthday was approaching, the Chinese have been on an influence overdrive. They have suddenly opened the Kailash Mansarovar route through Nathula, which had been closed for a while. And then they have taken select Indian journalists on a tour of Tibet. I'm not sure as to why these people agreed to go on that tour, but that has happened. Now, evidently, that has not worked out with the Indian political establishment, this influence operation. So, how will this decision of the Dalai Lama for reincarnation and the way to go about it, and his statement that the next Dalai Lama will be born in a free world, and it is getting support from the Indian government. So, how is this going to affect the Chinese and Indian relations in the longer run, and even in the shorter run?
Well, China-India relations have always been at loggerheads because of the Dalai Lama and the fact that we have given shelter to him as well as to several thousand Tibetan refugees. Whenever any Tibetan protests anywhere in the world, including inside Tibet, China feels that India is behind it, and China accuses India of being behind it. We have already faced a military invasion by China in 1962 because we gave shelter to the Dalai Lama. So our relations have been at loggerheads because of the Dalai Lama, and they'll continue to be so because the issue of reincarnation is a very personal and a deeply religious issue. It is the person who is reincarnating, so it is for him to decide how and where he will reincarnate, because he's an evolved soul, a spiritual soul, who can decide when and where to reincarnate. And the people have that deep religious faith in the institution to recognize the rebirth as a reincarnation of the same person. Now, well, India's position is that this is a religious matter, and the state does not interfere in these religious matters. We have religious leaders all over the country, and these religious institutions, they have their own procedures for selecting their own leaders, whether it's a Shankaracharya or any other head of any other religious body. The state does not interfere in them, and the people are free to go and worship there and follow the faith and belief that they have in those religious bodies. And the same respect will be given by India to the Dalai Lama as it has been given so far. So what Kiran Rijiju has said is absolutely correct, and it is for the Dalai Lama to decide when and where he'll be reincarnated. And for the Tibetan and for his followers to accept that reborn person as the reincarnation of the 14th Dalai Lama. It is not a matter for the state to get into. The state will be dealing with, and here it is important that the political powers that the Dalai Lama had transferred to the Central Tibetan Administration, which is based in India, and whose head, whose members of parliament, members of cabinet, are people who are elected. The government will deal with these people. The government will deal with these people because they represent the Tibetan people politically. So the political cause, the issue of the administration of the Tibetan people living in exile, the issue of representing their views in any negotiations that may take place with the Chinese government or with any other government will be by this Central Tibetan administration. So the Sikyong, who is the president of this government in exile, he travels all over the world. Mr. Pempa Sering is the president, and he meets leaders, he meets parliamentarians, at times he meets senior leaders of governments, especially in the West, but elsewhere as well. And in that process, he's building up the Tibetan cause. And this is the great contribution that the 14th Dalai Lama has made to his people, that he has separated the two bodies, and he has said that the Dalai Lama will be the spiritual head, but the administrative work will be carried out by the Central Tibetan Administration.
So, despite this segregation of powers between the spiritual and the political dimensions between the two, Dalai Lama still remains the icon, the brand of the Tibetan cause, I would say. So, are we looking at yet another situation like the Panchen Lama, where we might have two Dalai Lamas in the future?
There will certainly be two Dalai Lamas in the future because China will not relent. China will appoint its own official Dalai Lama in Tibet, as it has appointed a Panchen Lama. And since the Gaden Phodrang Trust have been given the responsibility of going ahead and fulfilling the desire of the 14th Dalai Lama to identify the successor, there will be a Dalai Lama outside as well. So we will have two Dalai Lamas. The question is, whom do the people respect, and whom do they show their reverence to? Now, we have seen that the fake Dalai Lama inside Tibet gets no reverence anywhere, either inside Tibet or outside, because the people know that he doesn't enjoy the kind of religious authority
The
or the
Panchen Lama,
spiritual
sir.
authority.
You are referring to
Sorry,
the
the Panchen
Panchen.
Lama. So I'm sorry, I keep mistaking here. The fake Panchen Lama inside the Tibet, he does not enjoy that authority. Now, the Dalai Lama who will be born outside, uh, again, we don't know how he will evolve, but that's in the future. That will be at least 15, 20 years later. So that we will see. But in the interim, in the modern age, there has to be a continuity in the governance. And that is what the Dalai Lama has ensured by transferring his political authority to the Tibetan government in exile.
Sir, would like to conclude on that note. And before concluding, sir, before the conclusion, I would like to take this opportunity to convey my best wishes, the best wishes of the Indian people to the Dalai Lama. His birthday is on the 6th of July, I believe. And the Tibetan calendar, he had his birthday yesterday on the 2nd of July. So I wish him a very long, happy, and a very healthy life. And those wishes are sincerely from the heart. Thank you so much for sparing time for us, sir. Thank you, and Jai Hind.
Thank you.